My name's Sean. I'm the brand director for a Glasgow-based brand called Mara, who focuses on sustainability and ethical production in tandem.
Hi guys, welcome to Conversations and Cocktails. We are Mandatory Fun. I'm Mirren and I have made the Chanel cocktail.
Made an espresso martini, and I also have several vodkas on the side just in case.
I made a mojito. Well, I've kind of drank it all, so I can't really show anything.
made a smoked rosemary Negroni, which is a lot stronger than it sounds, to be honest.
I was meant to make like a cosmopolitan, but last minute decision, I chose not to drink tonight, so I'm going with just a nice glass of Coke. But in my heart, I'm drinking a cosmopolitan, so cosmopolitan.
I don't drink actually, so I've got a scheme cocktail, you could say, that's really just bringing the tone down a little bit of this classy affair. So just a bit of like background. So my mum was in the fashion industry for 35 years or something like that. So, you know, I like grew up with this kind of awareness of high street fashion. She was a buyer for a number of companies. So she was always like off in, you know, Bangladesh and Pakistan and China and all these kind of places. So I kind of like grew up with this awareness of what went on behind, you know, behind the scenes almost in high street fashion, which obviously as you get older, you realise, all right, actually no one else, that's not like a common thing that people know about. So I spent a lot of time in buying offices when I was young and stuff like that, but no real fashion background. I left school when I was 15. I played in bands for quite a long time. So, you know, the other thing that was quite inherent to me was a real kind of do-it-yourself sort of ethic. You know, when you're in a band and you make your own merchandise, and you know, when you're really starting out, you know, you just make everything by hand. You make CDs, like all the rest of it. So the two, you know, those two kind of things working in parallel, kind of got us to where we started the brand. That was the ethics, I guess, behind it, and with such a kind of in-depth knowledge of what factories were like, how people were treated, all the rest of it. It was a kind of no-brainer to just be like, well, let's just do like the opposite of all of that stuff, you know, from the get-go, which has not been easy, but here we are.
Now that's really interesting to me how, like, again, you've became independently knowledgeable. Like no one forced you to do it. You weren't in a course where you just sort of picked up on it on your own. So like naturally, the next question would be just to like let us all know a bit more about your brand, because I know your brand. I've worn your brand, but I know like there's people that like might not be as knowledgeable, people not from Glasgow and stuff. So
Yeah.
how would you describe your brand?
So the brand is, the brand is almost like we try and make the brand almost like it's a talking point for sustainability, where each collection and each drop hopefully is, another step towards sustainability, and it lets us have that discussion with the customer about what we're doing, where we're going, what we're trying, and I think it's because half the battle about sustainability in fashion is like no one knows, what goes on in the fashion industry more. Most people don't know. So while we obviously have pieces and we work on all these pieces, it's also it's a platform to have the conversation as well. So if we're making something and it's from organic cotton, okay, well, why are we making it from organic cotton, and what's the difference? What's the environmental impact of regular cotton versus organic cotton? Things like that. It's a good platform to have those conversations and just get more people aware.
Again, like that's really interesting to me that like no one, again, no, you had no incentive to go towards a sustainable route, but you chose that on your own.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of other Glasgow brands, but they don't go that route a lot because it's either costlier or it takes more time to produce and all that. But it's good to see. It's so fresh to see, especially in like Glasgow's up and coming fashion scene, because I see a lot more brands popping up every now and then. Mm-hmm. So like specifically just staying on the topic of Glasgow, how would you say that Glasgow shaped like your brand? Just being a Glasgow boy yourself, thinking I am doing that.
I think it would be impossible for it not to shape the brand. I've grown up in Glasgow my entire life, pretty much, in the south side of Glasgow my entire life. It would be, there will be things there that are that I don't even notice, that are little kind of snippets of Glasgow and of Scotland. I suppose like the thing that really I think Glasgow, because it's small, compared to like London or something like that, I think the community aspect of it is something that again was just inherent from the beginning. So if you tie that in with the kind of background in the music scene, so when we have an idea or we have we want to do X, Y, or Z, we find somebody local, because there will be someone, and it's because it's such a kind of tight-knit group, someone will know someone, and it's easy to make those relationships. And the other thing that's important to us that I should have mentioned beforehand is sustainability and ethical production are still like very separate conversations. So when we started off having the brand based off of, okay, well, here's how fast fashion makes their clothes, let's do the opposite of that. Sustainability for us came hand in hand, which for some people it doesn't necessarily. A good example of that might be, I've given talks and done Q&As and all the rest of it before, where people ask, well, I bought this organic t-shirt from Primark, that's good, isn't it? And it's like, well, it is kind of, but also not really, because who made that garment is a separate conversation, which we need to probably try harder to knit together.
No pun intended.
No pun intended. Literally and figuratively,
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's obviously a massive part of like tying all this together and making some actual real change. But I find it really interesting the fact that you said that you had no formal education in this, because sustainability is something that we as a group talk about a lot, particularly within the fashion industry, and looking at ethical production and comparing things like, you know, working wage issues to things like buying organic. And you're right, like so much of that exists as separate conversations, and there's all this greenwashing going on by big corporations like Primark. So yeah, that's a really interesting point.
And it feels like it should be obvious, and it's not. And it's easy to fall into that trap. Like when you know so much about, like as you guys are saying, you know, we talk about it so much that you forget that most people probably don't know any of that. Most people probably see, you know, an H&M doing a sustainability campaign and think no further than, oh, that's probably pretty good, you know. So it's a conversation that needs to be more coherent, I think.
Yeah, 100%.
What would you say like are the main sort of like trials and like struggles that you face while trying to like stay close to what you believe in as a brand, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I think what we have realised is that, you know, the United Kingdom actually is somewhere that's had the manufacturing industry as a whole just completely ripped out of it. I had kind of stupidly assumed that, oh, you know, it's going to be easy, we're going to make things locally. And honestly, you could count on one hand the amount of people in the UK probably, or well, you know, this is maybe 2-3 years ago when we started getting things in motion, you know, that would manufacture for you. So the very first thing we ever did was we made a hooded sweatshirt that was organic, it was made locally, and halfway through getting those sweatshirts made in Glasgow, the company went out of business. They shut down. And things like that happen a lot, which is unfortunate. You know, there's been like sock companies halfway through making them, they go out of business.
Yeah.
So that probably has been quite difficult. But like one of the things that, like during this, you know, pandemic and lockdown and all the rest of it is when we've tried to scale up, we've had some stuff manufactured in Leicester. So we've been down there, you know, met people who run very small production houses down there. And that's good to begin with. And then once we get into this pandemic, you know, the thing is, of course, those guys are closed because we're in a lockdown. And then you're like, you know, it's ironic that probably people who are manufacturing in Bangladesh and all the rest of it are probably making, you know, they're probably profiting off of this situation because they'll be working regardless. And we're all stuck at home. So those kind of things are a struggle where, you know, when you've tried to do all of the right things and it ends up working against you sometimes in the long run.
Yeah.
But it's worth it in the end.
Do you think that comes down to like how cheap it is to get stuff made abroad? And when you want to make it in the UK, you've got to go with like UK minimum wage. So all this cost has to factor into like the price you charge for your clothing.
Yeah.
But people are so used to this expectation of like paying like £3 for a t-shirt out of Primark.
Absolutely. And that's where that just comes back to this conversation about how sustainability and ethics need to be linked more closely so that people understand, because you know, they can go to H&M and buy an organic t-shirt and it's a tenner, and they go, oh, well, that's good, I'm doing a bit of good there, that's sustainable. And it's like, nah, that's not even, there's another issue behind that, which is much greater. And so it is like, as I was saying, we try and use the brand as a platform to have these conversations, to try and change the way that people think, because people do expect, people might see a hoodie that's it's 150 quid, but it's they don't probably see what goes into it. So it's trying to communicate that without giving the whole game away, I suppose. Because everybody is paid the living wage. We have one full-time pattern cutter that works for us. The standard for that industry is like 25 to 30 pound an hour.
Yeah, so expensive.
Which is worth every penny. But you can see why that would put people off. If you have the choice between doing that and getting stuff made in China or Bangladesh, and it costs you less than a tenth of that. If you're not interested in sustainability or ethics, that is a no-brainer. I'm going to sound like a pure pensioner here, right? The age of social media, right? There's such a pressure on people to have like new outfits all the time, new clothes all the time, and there's this pure, I mean, this is obviously pre-pandemic as well. There's like a pressure, especially on women, to every weekend it's got to be a new outfit if they're going on a night out or whatever it's got to be. And so there's all these like little tiny nuanced things that we have to try and change and try and tell people, these things last for a long, long, long time. Even if you throw it out after one wear, it doesn't disappear. So that's like one of the sweatshirts we just released recently. The cotton that we used for those recent sweatshirts was 30 years old already, and it was perfect condition, had never been touched. So it's trying to use those little things to have those kind of conversations.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think that's a very important conversation, particularly right now, as we think, I guess we have for a year, but thinking about going back into the world. I can't remember which brand it was, maybe one of you guys can, but they were like, a few hours after Boris Johnson had made the announcement that June 21st was the day, they'd made a meme and posted it to their social media about their June 21st like capsule or whatever, and it was just so quick on the mark, and that's playing right into people's insecurities of like, oh no, am I ready for the world, and what will I wear?
Exactly.
How do you, like, as a brand, like, how do you communicate sustainability in such a way to your consumers?
So we try and make a kind of a big deal about making things locally, and like try and make people understand that it is possible. And if it's possible for me, who's just like some idiot with no formal education, it should be possible for a £1 billion company, £1 million company, whatever it may be. If I can go and find somebody with a fashion degree and hire them to make our samples, I can do that. But if I can do that, then why can a big company not hire 100 students, manufacture it in the UK? And it's because they don't want to, because it's too expensive, like as you were saying earlier on. So we try and like just really push those things all the time, and it can feel sometimes you're like, Christ, I can't, I must sound like a broken record here, but as new people develop your brand, discover your brand, it's important to keep those conversations going. Explain that they're made locally, people are paid the living wage. Talking about fabrics, talking about why certain fabrics are acceptable, why we should be moving away from certain fabrics, how we can impact other industries Sustainability is not just limited to fashion.
Yeah.
So for example, we are sampling with a fabric called Econile at the moment for stuff down the line, and it's recycled post-consumer plastic. So that had, we can actually do things that impact the ocean, because it's old fishing nets, it's old plastic bottles. Fashion is, it's important to use sustainable fabrics in fashion, but there are also things that we can move towards that have a wider impact than just this industry. And it's all coming back to these, like, all these things, trying to make all these things part of one big conversation rather than separate things.
Do you, as a sustainable brand, do you find social media like a positive or a negative for fashion? I mean, in way of like fashion brands can advertise, but it's also a platform per se for like slow fashion brands to promote looking after the planet and stuff.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, because it does promote that thing of always having new clothes, always having new outfits, but we have to try and also use it to fight against that. And probably most brands probably wouldn't be anywhere without it, especially now. There are no stores open. It probably has been a lifeline for a lot of those small brands. So it is, yeah, it's a good thing if you can use it for the right things. But you don't want to rely on it too much. That can be a trap, to think that it's the entire world exists on Instagram.
Yeah.
It's important to do like these kind of things, and to do try and do physical things as well. Because we've done little pop-ups where a 5-10 minute conversation with someone can sink in and affect their shopping habits much more than maybe a post that they skip by.
What we keep on talking about a lot with the work that we create at uni is how personal it is to us. So like as creatives, like when we get criticized, we take it personally because our work is, like who we are. So I think it's really important that actually, like, no matter where your knowledge is like, it's really based on your personality too, with how far work can go. Because you can be trained a certain way, but really it just comes down to the type of person that you are to actually like create something cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really important for creative people to have other creative people around them just to bounce those ideas off of.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of fashion's problems, bit of a broad statement here, but elitism is obviously massive. So there's been a real strong narrative coming from one specific area of society for quite a long time. And for people who are not formally trained to be given that access to innovation and creative ideas can only really push things forward, in my opinion. So yeah, another big thumbs up for that. That's cool.
And I think Instagram and stuff like that can often actually ruin what you were saying there, Anna, about how personal it is to some people, because maybe someone who has a real like passion for design or for fashion, they can be influenced by seeing if something's really popular on Instagram. It might be a certain look or a certain garment, and they think, well, that's really popular, and if I want to succeed, maybe I should just do that. So you end up with a lot of these like copycat brands that have the best intentions, but they're being bombarded with the same thing just all the time. And by the time they get round to doing it, it's moved on. Fashion has moved on, and it can be quite demoralising. So that's a really important point about it should always be personal.
Yeah.
Just do what you like doing. People will come around in the end.
So I just want to talk to you a bit about being a young person in today's society, because as we know, it's maybe getting tougher as we go on, or easier. I'm not sure what your opinion is. But have you always felt like a creative person as you were growing up?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it always like, it depends on like what your upbringing, I suppose, is like, what your parents are like. My dad was always like mad into music when I was growing up, and as I said, my mum was always in the fashion industry, so I had that kind of like, always had that kind of creative energy, I suppose, around. And when I was really young, I learned to start playing instruments and stuff. And when I was at school, I wasn't really very good at anything other than like music and art and these kind of things. And then as you get older, you realise that these things very much cross over, and it encourages you to try other things. And if you're not scared to do that, it can kind of just fuel those creative ideas across a kind of wider scope almost. So yeah, the more things that we do, the more things that we try, it makes you feel more and more creative and more willing to try other things maybe that you are not, trained in.
Yeah, definitely. I think the older you get, the more you notice how each art just like comes in together. Like everything kind of adds up.
It's a big melting pot, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. What do you think the main differences you can see are in the creative industry now compared to our parents' generation? Because obviously things right now are going so quickly, so it's difficult to keep up. But there's kind of that weird gap in between the past, like maybe decade, where there's just that like really quick change.
I think it's definitely it has speeded things up a lot, which I think is what we are kind of, we're all probably kind of trying to fight against a little bit. It means anybody can have their own brand, anybody can be, an internet sensation, for good or for ill, which is probably pretty alien, I suppose, to our parents' generation. And it really highlighted it actually when I was starting, when I was thinking about starting this brand, and I went to my mum and I said, this is what I'm going to do. And she said, okay, and I explained the kind of idea behind it, and it was so alien to her. It was the opposite of everything that she knew about it. And she's got a textile degree, she has got all of the formal education, and it was so alien that she was like, I need to like rethink about all this. Like, I need to like learn about sustainability and like what it is that you're trying to do here. And she, she's got a lot of contacts in the fashion industry, so she keeps in touch with a lot of these people, a lot of these big bad guys that own Boohoo and all these big companies. They all know each other from working in the industry through the years. And she's told these people about my brand and like what we are doing, and they all say the same thing: just go to Turkey, just go to Bangladesh, just that. It's so, and they all think that's how it's done. It's so easy. Why are you doing this? Why are you making this so difficult for yourself? So that's a really defined difference between that generation and this generation, in fashion anyway, and of course culturally, otherwise, for artists, for musicians, the access probably is much easier for us than it was for them.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like the balance of how easy it is to find new brands and things. Like a good thing or bad thing. It's kind of like music, is it a good thing that we can access music so quickly that we're barely even listening to albums at this point?
And like, you know, the idea to them, you know, to our parents' generation, that you can have an idea for a brand and start it tomorrow, you know, and have an Instagram page and a website and blah, 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 basically in 24 hours, is probably nuts. Because back, you know, not that long ago, when they were our age, you would have had to just open a shop and just hope that it worked.
Yeah.
There wasn't really another way to do it, you know.
Yeah. I think it's also got a lot to do with privilege now, which is a heavy topic to go into.
Yeah.
So we won't touch on it too much, but I think that's another thing to consider in the fashion industry, is it is really easy to get into, but there's that sort of level that you need to come in from, maybe. I'm not sure. This kind of ties into my next question. It was about if you've experienced ageism in the industry, or anything to do with your life, maybe like your upbringing or anything.
I think mostly people are pretty receptive. Like, people kind of like the idea, I guess, that I don't have any formal education or formal background. Most people are pretty interested in that. That you do get a little bit of a, you know, if you try and work with anybody in London, or if you go to any of these, you know, conventions, everything is so London centric, and that's becoming, I mean, for me, that's really antiquated. But there still is that hangover of like, what, Glasgow? Really? Is that like, what's going on up there? And I'm like, you know, loads of stuff. You know, oh no, you want to get yourself down to London, mate. You know, fashion, you need to get yourself down to London. I'm like, I'm not interested. Do you know what I mean? That is, we've moved on. You know, we don't need to. So there are those little things. Fashion, of course, as you were saying earlier on, can be quite elitist. So before I actually started the brand, I went to, in fact, I'm not going to name them, right, just in case. Someone in Glasgow that runs a kind of agency for fashion creatives, and my mum knew her actually from way back. They had crossed paths, and explained what it was that we were aiming to do, and she was so dismissive. It was actually like it actually really put me off guard, because she was like, doesn't make any sense, don't believe in what you're saying, don't think you're going to get anywhere, you know, no education, don't, you know. And actually that made me go, nah, well, do you know what, I'm going to come back here in 12 months and show you. So it actually did spur me on. But you can imagine, you know, how many people maybe have come up against that and thought, you're right.
I want to put in, but
yeah, well,
do you feel like that comes from a generational gap? Do you feel like the generation above us, it was like money, 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 they had to make money because they were following the generation before? Whereas like, I'm a millennial, I don't know about other people, but I mean, like, millennials and Gen Zs as a whole, like, we feel now like we're starting to take responsibility for older generations' actions against like the planet and stuff. And the internet's had such an impact on this, because we can now exchange information with someone on the opposite side of the world in like a second. So we're so aware of what's going on throughout the planet that we're now realizing that the damage that's been done, that we feel like we're now almost putting each other into a state of shock, going, well, if we don't fix this, the planet's going to die. So do you feel like that's like a generational gap that's caused that, and we feel like responsible?
Yeah, I think there certainly is a generational gap there, but there's also, I think, the elitist thing, I think, is also a bit of is a bit of a hangover from a generation where you have to remember probably that generation in all aspects, like, if you don't have a degree, you're not getting a job. You know, there was you know, I remember being at school, and like, you know, even then, the idea is like you go to uni, that is what you do. Or you do something, and it doesn't matter if you don't know what your interests or your passions are, you just go and get an education because you're not going to get a job otherwise. So I think probably a lot of these people who are, in their 60s now, the kind of people that I'm talking about, the idea that you would have the audacity to enter the fashion world without a textile degree or without 5 or 6 years of, being educated and then going to intern for somebody, and the idea that you want to say, nah, I have got actually the capability to do this on my own and to figure it out. I'm not sure if it feels insulting to them, but that's definitely a kind of little a little area of kind of conflict that you find with that older generation.
So my questions are a bit more light-hearted and a bit more like personal to you.
Okay.
So
yeah, that sounds.
You mentioned earlier that you were in a band. Can you tell me more about that?
I was in a couple of bands through the years. So I spent about 16, 17 years probably playing in bands and just like touring and sleeping on people's floors all over the place. So I think that probably has informed the brand somewhat as well. Been a lot of places, met a lot of people. There's probably influences from all over the place in there, knocking around.
What kind of music was it, and what did you actually do in the band?
So I played guitar. It was kind of like heavier sort of music, kind of like rock, punk kind of thing, which is like there's a huge DIY sort of ethos built into that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was one of the things that was just like so inherent to us that we couldn't have imagined doing it any other way.
Would you say that your music's kind of influenced your brand in any way?
I think so. Yeah. There's a lot of there's probably a lot of things subconsciously, just like little things, like it might be fonts or things that we reference. We spend so much time like referencing stuff and like collecting references from all over the place. So definitely, yeah, in a way, it'd be hard to pin down, but definitely in many ways.
Cool.
And do you know what? It's a lot of the people that we use are people that we met through the music
Mm-hmm.
scene. So we tend to stick to that. That just feeds into that idea of community, and we already had a kind of decent community of people around us.
Would you say any kind of artist you're interested in, if their fashion style, would you take inspiration from that at all?
Any musical artists?
Yeah, anyone in particular that you're kind of interested in at the moment?
That's a good question, actually. That's a good question. I'm not sure. There probably is a kind of a sort of punk aesthetic that sort of permeates our brand. If you thought about it, a lot of these things like raw edges and things that are visibly kind of cut up is probably comes from that kind of scene. I can't think of anybody actually that I really like. I really like their fashion sense at the moment. I'll come back to you on that one. I'll have a think about it.
This hasn't really got anything to do with fashion, but what would you say you're missing most about life in general, pre-lockdown and everything?
Traveling, probably.
Yeah.
Not it wasn't you know, I've never been done loads of like mad traveling, but you know, the thing that stung the most was we spent a long time organising a pop up in New York, like, and it was meant to be in March, like right when lockdown kicked in.
Oh no!
So that has hung over us ever since. You know, that we were going to do this pop up in New York. It was all organised. It was booked. It was like it was going to be great. So probably the freedom to do things like that. You know, we've been trying to do our best to still do stuff, but everything has just got an extra layer of difficulty.
One more thing to ask everyone, just to add in a little bit of something. Has anyone been watching anything interesting recently, such as TV shows or films? Because I'm at such a like lull of nothing to watch anymore.
I was just gonna say, I've made my way through quite a bit of Schitt's Creek in the past like couple of days even. I'm finding that when I'm starting something, I am finishing it.
Schitt's Creek is what I watch when I'm sad.
It depends what you're after. I watched there was a series of films by Adam Curtis that came out just recently, and it was fucking so depressing, but it was brilliant. Depends if you feel like you could handle that at the moment.
What kind of wavelength? I had a mini film marathon where it was just movies that focused on drug addiction. You know, we did both Trainspotting, we did Requiem for a Dream, we did Acid House. Yeah, it was just all of it. All at once.
Nice. Adam Curtis makes films about kind of like politics and this kind of the state of the world almost. It's such a broad scope, but there's a series of short films kind of about how we got to where we are and the kind of era of the individual. So it covers like loads of stuff, like stuff that was going on in Russia, you know, politics here, like how they ended up with Brexit, you know, how we've ended up with this society that just, you know, basically blamed everything on immigrants, you know, how we got to be in all these horrible places. So if you can handle that, it's a good watch.
Sounds good. I like grim stuff.
Like
it's on iPlayer.
Is it kind of you know, obviously if it's touched on things that actually happened, is it kind of documentary style or is it more dramatized?
Yeah, it's a documentary. It's
right.
Because it's the BBC, it's just like all like archive footage from through the ages. It's good. It's really good.
My favorite movie of all time is like a French kind of production. It's called Enter the Void, and it's like so visually heavy. So it's like mainly about visuals. So the synopsis says there's a guy and he's selling he lives with his sister in Japan. And it's just them two, and he sells LSD just to like get by. And then one day when he's selling the LSD at a club and the police come in and just to hide his LSD, he like shoves it all down his throat. He dies. But then the entire movie is just through his point of view. So as a ghost, he's just flying around Japan and there's all these colors coming at you.
Yeah, his point of view after all the acid.
Wild.
He's still on LSD. So like that music video, that movie inspired a lot of music videos, like the LSD from A$AP Rocky, all of the like Kanye West, all these like so many other videos, and it's just like
kind of similar, I guess. My favorite movie is Trainspotting because I like how like down to earth and gritty it is.
Yeah,
and the fact that because I'm from Edinburgh and grew up in Edinburgh and now live in Edinburgh, I'm just like, oh look, there's that, and oh look, there's that. But then at the same time, it's not like, oh my god, they fall in love. It's like
a lot of it was actually filmed in Glasgow, so I didn't know that until I moved to Glasgow.
Let me live my life.
Yeah.
That and I think The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, I doubt anyone's heard of it. It's like from like 1930s, 1940s. And it's like a silent film in black and white from like the rise of like cinematography in like Berlin. And it's so good. But it's all in black and white and you'll need to find it on the internet. But it's
what was that called again?
The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
Okay.
But it's like a black and white silent horror.
Okay.
So it's an acquired taste, but